Just going to double check our chapter order here, and we'll take a look at what's coming up next. So we've got Renado chapter 2 next. So we met Renado yesterday at in Kedar port on the 29th of the 5th moon, and today we'll be catching up with him again on the 1st of the 6th moon. So there's 30 days in each month, and this has been just 2 days later. Of course, their contact in Kedar port was missing and apparently had been killed. So they need to find someone else to sell their smuggled arms to. And so we'll explore that in Renado chapter 2. Again, I got character art for some of the characters here, but for Renado we don't. So we're going to have just the map as a visual aid here for you guys while I dive into the podcast segment. And then after that, we'll kind of wrap up, come back after supper, and we'll start some more interactive world building. If anyone wants to get in on that, of course, be sure to say hi in chat. And I always appreciate the follow, subscribe if you're on YouTube. It goes a long way to helping me out. And yeah, we'll see if we can get some of you guys, the viewers, to get involved on the story. All right, Renado 2. Renado 2, 1st of the 6th moon, year since Orish 1478. The smugglers spent the time at the public house of Kedar for 2 days. The public house was the only inn, more or less, in the city, a bustling business with 100 guards, 100 rooms, and one of the largest common rooms that Renado had ever seen. No smaller taverns could keep their doors open in a town with no law. None could afford to keep any sort of decent calm within their doors. Each faction in the city has its own establishment, of course, but the public house was the only one of its kind. Banshee did his best to spread word of their prize without attracting any group powerful enough to steal them directly. Of course, the dispatch, which was still anchored out in the harbor, was under orders not to come ashore no matter what happened. The only way for anyone to obtain its cargo was to board it, or to convince Banshee or Renado to go and fetch the ship back to port. Renado spent his time getting a feel for the layout of Kedar. He helped his uncle in the inn a little, but he didn't like sitting around that much. The city seemed to be divided into quarters. The largest was marked at gates and entrances by a checkered pattern of black and blue paint, patrolled heavily by soldiers of that tower. The wide tower, to his surprise, was not the headquarters of any faction at all. It was an enormous housing building, with its various floors constructed by competing factions and criminal gangs. Renado managed to get inside for a while, but was only approached by drug dealers and drug-addled prostitutes. The other significant faction was the mining group. The other significant factions were the mining group, which was based outside the city in the rocky island countryside. Havard's Brothers, a religious group that believed its leader was some spiritual guide, and the Saltwater Army, an antique military group that had declined steadily since, according to their recruitment officers, the days of the Norris Empire. It was one of Havard's brothers, over a stout beer, that told Renado about Yeagle the arms dealer. The drunkard explained there was a man, Caro, who worked for Black and Blue. He was a gambler, a debtor. The Tower of Black and Blue owned him, you see. And Yeagle, he killed him? Renado asked. They had always been enemies, and Yeagle needed money soon, for some reason, the man explained to the son of Caro. Caro caught Yeagle stealing coin from him. Yeagle poked him full of sword holes, and the Black and Blue put him in a cage over the north gate, as far from the sea as they could. It's a superstition in the Isles, you see, on Kedar at least. The sea can lend its strength to the dying. So maybe hanging him in the north gate did help. I don't know. Dead is dead. Renado had seen thralls before, a dead man working for the sorcerer of Norris, but he didn't bother filling the man with further confusion. Most times when a group of people followed a spiritual guide, that guide had some knowledge of magic. Maybe Havard was a mage, or maybe he was just a clever crook. When Renado got back to the public house that day, Vanti was looking for him. "Welcome back, Ren. I have a meeting with a potential buyer, but you're not going to like it." "The Tower of Black and Blue?" Renado asked. He sat across a table from his uncle and waved a finger to a barmaid for a drink. Banshee had a balding head with an enormous widow's peak and a small brown mustache on his caramel skin. None other. They are sending a merchant over to represent them within the hour. We'll know him by his cape. Renado sighed. They have their hands on everything in Kedar, it seems. I thought this was a city of no law, not a city of their law. He proceeded to recount the Havertz brothers' story to his uncle, then asked, I think we ought to see what the merchant has to say, but we need to be careful. Agreed, Banshee said, with a grimace. The waitress brought Renado an ale, and the two smugglers shared their drinks in silence for a while. The room was patrolled by guards, which made Renado instinctively uncomfortable, though it made sense in a place like Kedar. When he had been exploring the city, he had seen bodies down an alley, love-making on a porch, and a gang selling slaves in the town circle. But the public house was kept under a careful scrutiny to maintain its lack of bias from the city's warring groups. Banshee agreed to allow Renado the final say in their approaching negotiation, as he had successfully done for past deals. When at last their contact arrived, he entered with 3 guards and 2 slaves. The slaves wore only trousers and carried a chest between them on long iron rods. They were branded on their necks and back, and covered in their owner's dark patterned ink. I see by the green eye that you are the men of Garo from Sheld? The merchant asked as he approached. Banshee and Renado stood up to greet their guest, with folded arms in front of their chests. It was a customary greeting across the grey sea, and the merchant politely returned it. Together they all sat. I trust your journey was smooth, the merchant said. I am Laren. Renado, son of Garo, Ren said, and this is my uncle Banshee. Good to meet you both, Laren said. I apologize for the complications upon your arrival here. Kedar is known to be a chaotic city at best, but we at the Tower of Black and Blue seek to tame it. As all the city's factions would suggest, Renado replied. Laren shrugged. He wore a silk robe that left a square swath of his hairy chest bare, and moved easily when he did. So it would seem to an outsider. Should we order some drinks? If you'd like, Banshee said. He beckoned another barmaid, and soon they were all sipping alcohol. Now on with business. I'll make this easy, Laren said. Eagle was a ruffian, a brigand, and a turncoat. He cost my employees a fair bit of coin he could not repay. We see his goods as our goods, but we will only offer what we gained from him as recompense for the arms you have smuggled here. You agreed with him on 500 crowns. 250 will be a sufficient amount for such tainted goods. Renado laughed. 200? We sailed across the grey with all that iron and bronze. You may see a sample of the goods if you like, but full price is a guarantee. I could sweeten the deal with a few of my own coins, perhaps 300, Laren asked. Another 100 crowns and I could consider a deal, Renado said. Banshee, would we even turn a profit then? Banshee didn't have to play along. It was a genuine concern. We might. This whole job has gone to shit. They grimaced, and looked back at Laren, who called one of his guards closer and whispered in his ear. Banshee gave Ren a raised eyebrow, as they waited for the exchange to finish. I cannot do it, Laren said. 325 is my highest offer, though I can throw in a slave as well. Banshee shook his head. The Eye of Garo has no use for slaves. They are not trustworthy enough. We reward our own, but we don't put more than the green eye upon them. Sell the slave, then, Laren said. You can get a good enough deal for one here in Kedar in quicker time than selling a load of stolen armaments, and you'll certainly break even with your expenses. Renado grimaced. No good trade required subsequent trades, but no matter his decision, they'd be returning it to his father with less than expected, and Renado's stint on the dispatch was likely to drag on another 5 years. I'll accept the deal. Your slave had best fetch a good price. Come with me, then, and you may choose one, Laren said. He instructed the guard to add another pouch to the chest of coins, which Banshee and Oma from the dispatch carried to safety right away. Soon enough, they had chosen a small, muscular man from a building adjacent to the Tower of Black and Blue. One of the mercenary soldiers washed the patterned ink from him, and Oma marched the slave away. Renado and the merchant shook hands on the deal, and Banshee took the merchant in a wagon to procure the arms from the anchored dispatch, while Renado and Oma went to the slave market. It took them a long time to clear the paperwork and wait in line for their slave to go up on the scaffolds for the crowd of bidders to analyze, but eventually their turn came. The slave sold for 35 crowns, bringing the total earnings of their deal past 350, as Renado had hoped. The buyer was a miner, who gave them the coin in an elaborate silver box that might sell for a few more crowns if needed. And at last their business in Kedar was done. It felt good to be back aboard the Banshee dispatch, even if Ren wasn't the captain. He let his uncle give orders, and before long the smugglers were setting out, sailing northward once more. Renado did the math on a small piece of parchment on the table on the ship's lower deck. They had made 72% of their original plan. Though it was a fair sight better than half price, Ren wondered what his father would say. So there's Renado 2. They're setting off from Kedar Port, heading north. Back towards home on the mainland.